What do you do when a reporter reaches out to you to find out more about your project? I'll give you your first tip. It's not how you start, but it's how you finish. Let's face it, developers don't want to hear from the local press about their application or project. Historically speaking, 99 out of 100 stories that are written about projects at the local level really turn out to be very negative press. So you can't blame developers and corporations for wanting to avoid any kind of media interaction, which we call flying under the radar. But because of today's digital age and digital media, that's becoming less and less likely. Flying under the radar is really just waiting for the inevitable. So when a reporter does reach out, what do you do? Well, here are some of my tips to help you get through not only a story, but potentially turn a negative story into at least a more balanced story. First thing you should ask the reporter when you're talking to him is, how did you hear about my project? That simple question will give you so much information. It could be they saw the application on the website of the municipality, but more than likely they probably heard from the opposition. And if they're hearing from the opposition, then you have to know and assume that their story has already been framed with all the derogatory allegations about the project. The second question you need to ask is, when is your deadline? Asking about the deadline, it tells you how much time the reporter is going to be putting into the story or has put into the story leading up to the call or email that you received. So let's assume that you have a day or two before the story has to be submitted. And we're talking about print media here, right? The local press, either dailies or community type of papers. The next question is going to be, when is this going to drop? When is it going to be published? I know the deadline's coming up, but when are you looking, to place it? And that will tell you also how important this story is. If it's going to drop on a Thursday, that's one thing compared to a Sunday story. If it's going to be a Sunday story, that's their greatest circulation, and that tells you that they're really looking at the controversial side of the story. So that information is very helpful as now you try to manage the narrative. My next tip would be to ask them, hey, can you send me the questions? It's okay not to have an interview just out of the blue when the reporter calls. Typically, setting up a time or setting up a mechanism such as, hey, can you put those questions in writing? I really want to give you some thoughtful answers. Majority of the time, the reporter won't have a problem with that. So ask them to submit the questions. And if you do get the questions in writing, my next tip is to make sure that you put together some thoughtful answers, right? And if you put together a Q&A for the project, you can pretty much use that as a script as a copy and paste. Another aspect of dealing with the media and trying to get your story heard, it's not just you being quoted in the story, but also offering your allies to the project. Offer to the reporter to introduce them to other people that are knowledgeable of the project and who's willing to endorse the project. This will do two things. One is, it's not what you say, but who says it for you. Now you have surrogates and proxies that have local reputations and credibility affirming your project, right? And the reputation that you have. The second advantage to offering third-party voices to be interviewed, your allies, is if they get interviewed, that's now reducing the column inches for the opposition. So this is essentially you're watering down some of the venom by offering your own voices to this narrative. So lastly, why are these tactics important? First and foremost, these reporters are sketch artists, not painters. And what that means is they just really have a very topical, superficial understanding of real estate and land development. So they're vulnerable to manipulation by the opposition. They're never going to get in depth into the full merits and factoids of your project. So offering answers in writing, offering allies to speak, it really helps this sketch artist called a reporter cobble together a story that's just not a default negative. It's now, you have the opportunity, to educate the reporter through this process and pull that story closer to the middle, at least being fair. You might get lucky and get a positive story. It all depends on who you're offering and the time frames and the dynamics. But it's good to have a plan of action when you get that call or that email from the reporter. And as I say, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And if you follow these tips, you'll put yourself in a stronger position to mitigate the expected negative press that the opposition has put forth by contacting this reporter initially. So now you have the driver's seat to at least educate this reporter, to mitigate a story, and maybe set up a relationship for follow-up stories with this source. So I hope these tips empower you in your future engagement with the local media to protect and promote your project. Be sure to hit like and subscribe here before you go, and I look forward to seeing you in a future episode of The Art of NIMBY. Thank you.